How Hitchens Can Save the Left, Rediscovering Fearless Liberalism in an Age of Counter-Enlightenment. The great Christopher Hitchens can save the left. The left's in trouble. It's worth saving, says Matt Johnson. And one of the reasons it's in trouble is because it's immersed in the sinister bullshit of identity politics, what Hitch called. And Hitchens can save us from that too. How so?
He was very opposed to identitarianism because he saw it as regressive. He would, in one article he wrote, if we were dogs, we would all be the same breed. Like, emphasizing human difference is unhealthy and it's tribal. And it's become very obsessive on the left. I've listened to you for years, Glenn, you and John McWhorter. I'm not a fan of the D'Angelo school of identitarianism, not a fan of Kendi. These guys, they really do frustrate me because I even look at the history of the civil rights movement and I wonder what Martin Luther King or Bayard Rustin would say about a movement that encourages large audiences of white people and corporations to look inward and identify and root out their racism instead of just looking at inequities in the society and trying to address them on a fundamental level. It's this toxin. It's so easy to be tribal. It's so easy to identify with a group. And Hitchens, in Letters to a Young Contrarian, for example, he just said that identity politics is a cheap excuse for politics. To the extent that the left was enmeshed in it, which it really has been for a long time, it was giving away one of the most important moral principles that it could hold, which would be universalism. We should try to move toward a colorblind society. I know that saying that just automatically gets you branded a reactionary. It's like saying all lives matter. Like, that's just, you're just viewed as somebody who's, fighting the progress of racial justice in the country. I really do think that should be the end goal. And if it takes 200 years, so be it. If it takes 500 years, so be it. But I think there are a lot of people who don't think it's the goal we're striving for. I think they think that race is this eternal fact about us, and racial division is an eternal fact about our politics. And Hitchens always hated that idea, and he thought we could be radical enough to get past it.
Why do you think the identitarian view of the world has had such success on the left? You might have thought, even without the high ground, the high kind of ethical ground of universalism, a kind of transracial humanism, even without that, just the practical politics of it, I need to build coalitions to get people lined up on the same page behind what I'm trying to achieve. I have a left agenda. I want universal health care. I want less military spending. I want higher wages for workers. How am I going to get it? I need to get a 51% to the polls. How do I do that? I get people of different stripes around the same, agenda, and we march together. I don't understand. I mean, the susceptibility of a kind of socialistic orientation to all of this special claiming, all of this kind of insular thing. And so why has identity politics become such a powerful theme on the left? I mean, I have my own theories about it, but
I would assume yours are more fleshed out than mine. It's a form of inequality that's so obvious, I suppose, when people just look differently from you. If you're going to divide people into demographic categories, the kid down the street who, has an alcoholic, abusive dad, who works at the mine and has an unemployed mom and who's just in a low income bracket, he's just white. He looks like other white kids, and it's harder to sort of suss out what makes his oppression worse than somebody else's oppression or not as bad or what have you. And then I also do think it's just the history of the country. Looking at the civil rights movement, which was ultimately successful, and it ultimately gives you this sense of historical inevitability, which is probably a mistake. I think it's understandable for Black Americans in particular to say, we still have these vast inequities. We still have inequities in educational attainment. We still have inequities in health outcomes and massive inequities in levels of personal savings and household savings and socioeconomic status. So you just see those numbers and you see they have a racial valence. And then you just say, well, the work of Martin Luther King just obviously isn't done, and we need to be radical and we need to mobilize on behalf of the most marginalized Americans. I do think that's understandable. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of people who are on the hard traditional left, they actually tend to distrust identity politics. They tend to distrust identity-based politics. So, like Chomsky's never really been he's not really woke. Hitchens has a history as a Marxist, and he always thought identity politics was short-circuiting people's brains and was cutting. You're not doing any of the hard work of trying to identify how to improve educational outcomes or how to reduce poverty. It's just grievance-based politics. It's just scolding. then there are other people on the left. I mean, Bernie Sanders, he said during the primary in 2020, we should choose the next president on the basis of ideas and principles and functional, political program. We shouldn't choose the president based on gender, race, sexual identity, anything else. And he
got savaged.
Yeah. And he was panned for that. Yeah. He was ripped to shreds for it. And this is, you see this over and over again among a certain class of left winger. And a lot of the time, these are the people who are just sort of traditional, inclined toward socialism. And, you can take it all the way back to Rustin, who was also a socialist. He said reparations was a harebrained idea. He thought it was a terrible idea. He was just like brutally consistent about that. So this is a radical tradition that is flying in the face of the sort of chic contemporary identitarianism. And that's another reason why I think Hitchens is a powerful voice, is because he sort of represented that in a pretty compelling way. His explicit anti-tribal focus, his explicit focus on universalism was valuable. And I wish the left would sort of rediscover it.